Good morning, all. This is Anushri from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting session of our webcast in partnership with Adrenaline on the topic Illusion of an Effective Performance Management. So, when you talk about performance management, the current methods of performance management only give the illusion that employees will get feedback that will help them to drive their performance. A performance management system is not just about goal settings or measuring goals. Apparently, it is about building and enabling culture centered on care and technology. This webcast will focus on some important factors like major challenges with the current ways of performance management system, what should be the major outcomes of a performance management system, and how we can address the current gaps in the system. What's the future of performance management entails, how we can build a performance management system which is centered on care and technology. To take us through with the expert view, we have today with us Krish Shankar, Group Head HR Infosys. We also have with us Mr. Sridhar and CEO of Adrenaline eSystem Limited, who will be leading the session ahead. To our audience today, we have saved time for you to ask questions at the end of this webcast. For those who are live, you can simply post questions at any time during the session in the comment section on your right hand side of the screen. We'll try to respond to as many questions as time allows. So, we have an exciting topic to discuss in this webcast today. So, without any further delay, let me invite Sridhar and Krish to take over. Over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you very much. It's a very,
Yes, Sridhar?
and I must also, are you able to hear?
Yes.
Okay. So I must also thank Krish for so kindly and graciously invitation to her for this session
Krish,
today.
Sridhar, your voice is breaking.
Krish is an avid reader. He loves nature and technology. I full EPL.
I think there is some connectivity problem here. So we'll start with this webcast by introducing Krish. So Krish has over 30 years of experience and has led HR function in organizations like Bharti Airtel, Philips, Hindustan Lever, and Unilever. In his wide-ranging experience, he has facilitated organization-wide transformation and capability development, along with leading the transformation of HR into strategic partner. Welcome, Krish.
Hello. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here. It's an interesting topic, and I thought, I hope you can all hear me. And this is a very interesting topic because it's very close to my heart. We talk about performance management, but there is a debate, and that's what we want to say: is that are we really managing performance, or are we under the illusion that we are managing performance? Yeah. So that's what we got to be talking about. So, I want to make this interactive, listen to you, hear your views, etc. So whenever you feel there are interesting points you want to make or questions, just put it on the chat or any questions, and maybe we'll keep every few minutes looking at it and getting back to you. Yeah. Now I think the whole idea is this. If you look at every organization and say, okay, how good is your performance management? Yeah. Everyone will say we are doing a great job. Yeah. Now the point is that true, or are we all under the illusion that we are doing a great job? That's the question. Because there is wherever you go, if you really look at all the elements of what you want to kind of to measure as effectiveness of a performance management process, normally we're not doing all of that. Yeah, so let's just go through that and maybe discuss and see if there are any ideas that you have. And if at any time you don't hear me or anything, just kind of quickly ping or talk, and then we'll try and get back. So the first thing is, if you really look at performance management, question is, what is the objective? Who wants what out of the performance management? Now, if I'm an employee, what do I want out of performance management? Yeah, and then I just want what we say, give me more. That's all. As an employee, I want this performance management to help me do more, make, I want better rewards, I want better ratings, I want growth, whatever it is. So every employee says, how is it going to help me, in me growing in this company, growing as a professional, better rewards. That's what the employee wants. Then you look at the company. What does the company want? And I think the company, if I were to really look at it, probably it's in three kind of areas. The first area I would say as a company is that as a company, every company would like an overall improvement in the performance. Yeah? Firstly, we have to achieve the results targets that we set for, and also improve over last year. So therefore, there is meeting targets and improving over what you've done in the past. That's what company wants, and it wants every employee to improve. That's number one. Number two, the company wants from the system a fair way to differentiate performance, yeah, and ensure that that differentiation of performance is used in rewards. So again, based on the philosophy of the company. Some companies may say, I don't want to differentiate performance. That's fine. Some companies say, I want to differentiate performance. But I would believe in the end, every company is looking at some amount of identifying who is good versus who is not good, so that they can decide what to do with each of them. Yeah? Whatever actions are out there. I think the third point, which I think a performance system that a company would like, is to say, okay, how can I improve the culture of this company? So that's the third area that companies want. A culture in the sense that I want these kind of behaviors, if they're really looking at some, or a culture of performance orientation, of merit, and those kind of things. So therefore, performance management helps in both. It helps probably, if done well, to get you the right behaviors that you would like. But if it's without complication, it also helps you in getting the performance, a culture of performance or not. So that's the thing. But in all this, there's somebody in between. That is the manager. The manager who's actually the guy who's running this performance management. Yeah. Now he's here. He says, "How do I now do it?" So his thing is, I want from my manager. He says, "What do I want most?" He says, "I want to use this to differentiate who's my good guy versus a bad guy. I want to use this to differentiate." So he's keen to do that, and he also doesn't want to lose good people. Yeah. So he says, "I want to retain my people." So therefore, the manager is in kind of a middle thing. He says, "Listen, I have to ensure that I use this to give good increments to my best people and not so good to be not so good. But at the same time, I don't want to lose people. I want to retain. So therefore, how can I use performance management to retain?" So that's where he is from. So you see the objectives of all the three key players here. Yeah, and the objectives of the three players are a little different. And that's where the thing starts with performance management. And therefore, if an organization says, I want to achieve all of these things, there are many things it has to do to ensure that it's achieving. So that was just a context about the objectives and the kind of little bit of an asymmetry of the objectives of the three key players. Now let's look at, just a quick peek into history and some of the things that are happening which will help us. Now, if I look at history, you all know, and I don't want to, performance appraisal started as a confidential report. People, it was like which is good. I think people knew, and it met one objective. The company or the management knew who it was, who's not good or good, that kind of thing. Then they said, now I have to tell my people. So the next step was I want to be transparent about what is written in the report and ratings. And if I remember when I joined Levers long back, in the mid-80s, we used to have a very interesting performance management system. They will write the report and they will say, and the report will be written nicely, tight, The boss will have a look at it. It will be sent back, and they'll read out the report after a long time. They'll say, "This is what we have written for you." Now, you know, and that was it. The next year they said, "We'll also tell you your rating." Firstly, they didn't tell us the rating. The next year they said, "We'll tell you your rating." And after that, you have to say whether you accept it or not. You have to sign. So that was the third year. So therefore, slowly, what happened? There was this transparency. Therefore, the objective of the employee, telling the employee that you have to improve, started coming in, and therefore it started. Then on this transparency, then slowly, because they said, "Wow, each one is being rated this. Let's try and put some bell curves there so that people are moderating the ratings, etc., etc." Then as the organization becomes bigger, they say, "Okay, we can't do it in a very thing. We have to put very strict bell curves and distribution, and therefore that thing, and there are the GE kind of a thing which said, I want to get rid of the bottom 10, therefore forced ranking and all of that." So therefore, that's how the performance management took on a very extreme kind of a differentiation approach, which I think is become, because that was just that one part of differentiation, which really at times people didn't, managers didn't like it because they lost control. Employees felt again it was arbitrary. So therefore, that was an issue with this extreme differentiation and bell curves. At the same time, there's this new thinking on positive psychology that's been coming. And there are lots of interesting research and theories on positive psychology that you've heard of late. I think the key thing, it starts from this whole appreciative inquiry thing that you work on people's strengths, you motivate them. So therefore, you look at more, discover in terms of what you can together create more. So there is all of these things that started coming, which said that maybe this boxing people is not right. You got to bring in some of these newer age measures, newer age thinking and psychology into looking at performance management. And what does all of that bring in? I think it brings in a couple of things. Number one, it brings in saying, okay, everybody can be developed. Number one, everybody can do more than they are doing. Focus on their strengths, they'll do. And therefore, the whole issue about this thing about boxing people and putting them in thing may not be right. So I think very strong push from that part also. So therefore, an overdose of what we call as this whole differentiation, which is only one objective, one of the three objectives that we would look at, came up. And there's, on the other side, there's this thing from the whole of positive psychology which came up, saying that let's try and use some of these things. And then I think we started in the last few years, there was a big disruption in this whole thing of performance management. Now, again, I think part of this disruption is again a little bit fuzzy, because I don't think we're all, as all companies, we're not sure what is it that we want. Some of them have gone completely to one way, some of them completely the other way. So therefore, I think we will know exactly in the next couple of years what it is. Yeah. And therefore, there is a middle path. And I think to go to the middle path, we've got to go to the objectives of what we want. Yeah. So going back, I think the objectives of what we want is really, this is a performance development process. Yeah? So therefore, you need to really put that as the core. If there's only one thing this has to do, it has to be performance development. Now, what do you need for performance development? I think very clearly you need a set of goals. You need a set of achievement against those goals. You need a set of behavioral achievement against goals, saying, not only think these are some behaviors you did. And then you need a set of things where people can, on their own or with the help of others, identify what they can do to improve. Yeah, so that's the number one goal. Therefore, I think the point that starts getting complicated is we add other things on top of it. So if it is only performance improvement or performance development, then this goal becomes quite clear. But soon we say, listen, based on this, we got to add this goal of differentiating and rewarding. Now that's when we got to think, because these are two different objectives, and that's where the performance management system has to become much smarter and agile. And I think there are two approaches to doing this. One approach is saying, listen, I think we have to make it all integrated. While you're doing performance development, let's be clear, this is what it is, and then use that to link with ratings and link with rewards. That's one approach. The other approach is saying, this is performance development, let it go on. I'm going to have a separate thing on rewards, which is completely different. Yeah, so there are these two approaches. And how are these going to work is a bit of a question. And that's where we got to go back again to each of these groups and really check what really is it that we need to do. If I look at an employee definitely wants to do at the end of every year or whatever, how's he or she doing? Number one, what do you think of me? They know. Number two, they say, okay, how is it going to help me? Am I going to get better rewards? And if they're not getting good reward, they'll say, I'm not being rated. So therefore, sense of fairness is very, very important. Sense of transparency to them is very important. So fairness, transparency, but at the same time, it's not very easy to take a message which is saying you're not as good as you think you are. So that's something we've got to figure out a way to get there. So if that is so, I think, while there are various things around, most employers would like, at the end of the day, a fair way of assessing them and a fair way of telling them where they stand. And I think we've got to figure that out. So therefore, there is a need to have one system for that, to giving them that kind of a feedback. Then you follow that up by saying, okay, why is the current system of feedback not working and how can I make it better? And that's where all this positive psychology comes in. And there are 3 or 4 things I can say that we can give to employees. Number one, I think give them feedback, which are ensure transparency and fairness. I think those 2 are very important. If you don't do this, the whole performance system goes first. Now, how do you do this? I think you got to ensure that they get feedback from sources which are not just one person, but they get feedback from others. So therefore, crowdsourcing of feedback for employees. So that's there. The employee should also know in some objective terms where he or she stands with respects to the job that they've been doing. Have I achieved? What is it? So therefore, is it good? If there are 10 other guys doing it, am I really better than them? So therefore, some amount of their own capability needs to come out in a very fair and transparent way. So I think when these data points are there, and that's where with the use of technology, the use of a more fair process, I think if employees get this feedback, therefore they can make a sense of themselves, a realistic assessment for themselves in terms of where they are, how they are. And that does not differ very much from what the boss assesses. That will be the biggest win we can get out of it. So we have to ensure that there is great amount of data points that people see. There's feedback regularly. There's some amount of crowdsourcing of information. Feedback is not just saying you did this or not that, but also data and things that employees can make sense of. Use that. Therefore, the employees can decide for themselves and have a realistic assessment of themselves where they stand. And that, as long as that is not diametrically different from what their boss or somebody thinks, then I think we've done a great job. Yeah, I think so. That's what we got to achieve: a symmetry of information, a symmetry of assessment of where an employee stands versus what the organization is. I think we've got to, and that will only come through lots more openness, transparency, more fair systems, so that the sense of fairness. So if we focus on that, then I think we'll make this a big difference. Then comes this whole thing about, so therefore, let's try that there are lots of issues there, but does it mean don't give employee a rating? I don't think so. As long as the employee gets a rating, I think sometimes it gives them more clarity where they are rather than being fuzzy about it. But I think they don't mind that. Give them a rating or whatever it is, but ensure that that is done in a transparent, fair way with a lot of data, a lot of things, so that the employees can also verify, ratify, and they feel that this is fair. So that's there. The other thing is that everybody wants to be in control. Even if somebody's got some kind of a performance, we got to have a way where we can control them to say, okay, how can I improve? What can I do better? So I think we got to have a way of getting that done, of continuing to give them an improvement plan. Yeah, and I think, and showing them that this is what they can do. So therefore, the dynamic nature of a process where there is constant help in somebody to improve is very important. So the performance management process should actually be a performance development and improvement process in a more dynamic way. So that's from an employee perspective. Now, coming from the organization, we spoke about it. So while performance development and all of these things happen, there is this whole thing about the organization's desire to link rewards with performance. Yeah. The pros I've mentioned about the two ways of doing it. One way is to link it or make it integrated. The other way is keep these two separate. Now, there are pros or cons of each. The linkage in large organization sometimes helps because then at least you're consistent, you're having more transparent processes, and it helps everybody think about it in the same way. So I think if you ask me, as long as you're aiming for fairness and transparency, it's better to link that and ensure that rewards are linked to some kind of a performance assessment. But you got to ensure the other part, the transparency, the amount of data that is there, enough data points to make realistic things are all there. If you don't link it, then what happens is that goes on, and here rewards you use some surrogate. You start using different methods, etc., etc. And over time, they'll also be questioned. And how did you arrive at it? You've got to be more transparent. So we probably have one more system of doing it. You may have a talent matrix, you may do something, but all of that will have to go back, and you've got to be more transparent. So therefore, my personal view is you have to have rewards. Some of the rewards should be linked to your performance, but ensure that they are transparent and they are linked. Don't create two separate systems. So there's one which is just performance management, the other which is just looking at rewards. I think those are some of the things. I mean, I can keep on and on. What I'm going to do here is to stop. I want to really think and look, listen and see what kind of questions you have. What kind of areas you think I should be talking more of, or we should be debating more of. And maybe if there are a couple of areas you want to talk about, why don't you kind of ping them on the chat, and then maybe we can explore some of those areas a little more in detail. So I'll just stop here for a minute.
Great. So we have some questions that being asked by the our viewers. That there's one question by Kapil. He's asking that what is that one thing in the current ways of performance management system that we are doing wrong, which is forbidding managers to give the negative feedback in a much productive way.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Again, go back to what I spoke about. It is the objectives. Yeah? The objective of a manager is he's constrained. Firstly, he wants to ensure that his team stays together. So he doesn't want to lose his people. He wants to keep them all happy. That's number. Because he says, if they leave, I'm in a problem. In companies where there is great talent, there is no shortage of talent. In those days, there used to be, in the early 90s, enough, most of the large companies had great talent and, mind a bit of attrition. You wouldn't just leave that easily. And therefore, they could be a little more tougher, with feedback and more kind of things. But now I think most managers are a bit worried, saying he's very good, I don't want to lose him. So therefore, that's number one. Number two is there is also a thing about, this comparative thing, Indian psychology, or especially in India or any other way. I think we are okay, but as long as we are not worse compared to somebody else, so therefore our yardstick is always somebody who's sitting next, my peer, my batchmate, etc. And that's in India becomes very big. You got to keep. I've not seen this overseas so much, but in India, I think because there is a very strong link to various things about there are markers of your success, your badge, your this, etc. jobs. Therefore, you start looking. That's the second thing that managers have to worry about. Now, so therefore, why are managers then? Managers can give feedback, but if that feedback is linked with pure feedback without link to rating, then they'll be happy to give that person that feedback. And they are careful because if they do too much, they don't want to lose that person. So there is a dichotomy here. So managers have to retain people. They don't want to upset people. Therefore, they are sometimes, soft pedaling this feedback bit in a clear way. But and again, I think this is all to the extent of the maturity of the manager, where managers have greater control over the teams, etc., etc. And they feel that this feedback can help them and they can develop them. Sometimes managers can give the strong feedback, but also ensure at the same time have a plan which helps this person grow, develop, and improve. So you got to strong feedback plus a plan for development will help them work on it. Yeah, it's not that saying, listen, you're not doing well, but you're saying, okay, you're not doing well, but why don't you do these things, and I'll help you do these things. Now, if therefore people would like that, and if not many managers are skilled at it, but if managers can do that, saying that yes, I mean, you look at a coach, many of you look at a football or cricket or whatever it is. I mean, a guy will say, listen, this area you're not doing well, but then they'll also tell them these are some things you should do. Let's practice it, do this, do this. So therefore, you are giving them a way of what you want to do and then help them. So I think we got to train managers to do that, bring that maturity and train them. So therefore, just to summarize your question, I think managers are worried, number one, about setting people because of all these things. Number two, I think we've got to train them, increase their maturity and train them to say that this feedback accepts a sense of coaching, and giving feedback as, therefore, this is where bringing a little element of coach and coaching in them that will help. And the third important thing is to see this connection of feedback versus a rating, which kind of goes into somebody's thing longer term. Yeah. And therefore, that's a tough call. Sometimes, the ratings are there and the ratings become like a kind of a stigma on you. They stay on you forever, and therefore companies put everything across ratings, and therefore those kind of things become too tough. So therefore, I think the ratings have to be taken in that spirit. I mean, organization should everything around. They should be linked to certain things. So therefore, from a systemic view of the organization, organizations should have ways. There should be some kind of rating, but those ratings should be in a way that's saying people are improving, the context in which there is a rating, and we look at the way things are improving. Therefore, having an index of improvement is more important than an index of where you are at a point of time. So therefore, that's the other thing that organization will have to also work with. Yeah, so I think these are some areas, again, not as easy as me talking here, but it's a tough one that we got to all work towards, training people, ensuring the right processes are there, more transparency, but also at the same time, removing these cultural linkages of, that are vestiges from the past, which are really acting up very strongly.
Yep. Sure. Question that comes to my mind that we started this webcast on the note that the current performance management system should be centered around care and technology. So when I talk about care, what are the different dimensions of this care which are stitched to performance management?
So I think, see the point, what is care? Care means we are focused on the improvement of the individual. Yeah? And therefore, the organization cares for your development. The organization cares for your your well-being and growth. Mm-hmm. And therefore, this care is just a word of saying, okay, this is a focus on development rather than on a much more stronger way of assessing you. So there is a greater focus on development. And how do you get that greater focus on development? Yeah? And that's why I think the performance systems should, anything that you want to show that there is this focus on development, this focus on continuous improvement, give more premium on how you're improving versus premium on where you are at a certain point of time. Those are the kind of things that organizations should send messages about. So therefore, in the end, we want improvement. We want you to grow and improve, and the organization will improve. But see, every improvement after some time, there is also what I call this thing of diminishing returns that you'll get when you can work on somebody, but after some time, yes, there are. So therefore, you got to ensure that people are ready with that kind of a message also. Yeah. So you're also caring for them because you're telling them, listen, maybe it's time for you to find something else rather than doing this because this may lead you to a place where you may not be very satisfied. So I think that's care means being more transparent. Care means being more fair. Yeah. So I think if I look at care, I think it's the focus on development. There's a focus on transparency. It's a focus on ensuring there is more fairness in what it is, and the focus of also telling people where they're not matching up, also in a clear, simple way, giving them an alternate option. Those are the kind of things that we should do. Sure. Technology, as I said, is the other part which will really help you to various some of the things that will bring all of these, this real-time feedback, fairness, all of those things. So we'll try and leverage that in.
Sure, sure. So we have received a question from Dakshina. So Krish, when we talk about the trends that are, changing the business ecosystem, one of the mega trends that we are observing is the rise of gig economy. So Dakshina is asking, what is the scope of performance management system in gig economy trend?
Yeah, I think, see, the gig economy, the performance management system is pretty, I would say, what would I put it? Pretty easy, right? Because in the gig economy, you're doing a particular job, yeah, and your performance in that job is linked to what I would say is, you're there, you're saying you're contracted for this, you do this, and then the client, whoever you're working with, is happy, saying, "Wow, you've done it or not done it, etc., etc." And they give you a feedback, and you can ask, saying, "How I've done, how can I improve, etc." Because as a gig employee, everybody is interested in getting more work, more orders, better work, larger share of the expense of the organization in that work. So I think all of those areas, therefore, it doesn't have to be a performance thing about saying, okay, these are behaviors you're doing. So all of those are not needed. Yeah. So gig economy is very clear, saying, you're not really worried about the cultural part or the leadership part of the gig economy. You're saying, okay, you've been supposed to do it. How have you done that? And it's much easier. And I think the gig employee also will accept that much more clearly. So I think performance thing is very important to them, because I think, see, you look at the way behavior is changing. Look at Uber. Yeah, I lived in Gurgaon some time back, and those days when you go and take a cab, it will be a little rough. But now when they know they're all being rated, they say, okay, boss, yahan charge kar lo, ye pani rakha hai, ye hai. So there are guys who are trying to actually, ensure that the ratings play an impact. So therefore, as a gig employee, you also know that all these are things. You do your project well, and therefore you will get better work, and therefore you try and ensure that feedback is there, and that feedback is built into your credit rating or something like that. And therefore those kind of testimonials help you in getting better work. So therefore, if you can link performance management to some kind of a history of great work, history of your thing, like the LinkedIn recommendation, those kind of things help you build a thing that outgrowing. Yeah, and therefore that's where, as organization, we have to ensure that this is the objective of the gig employee. They want to do well, they want to get more work. So how do you ensure that you give them that kind of a feedback so that they value it and they also work for it? Yeah. So I think it's a different thing. It plays a big role, but different from a regular employee. Regular employee, you may look at many other things, but a gig employee, it's much more clear.
Sure. So Krish, would you like to go back with the session and we can take the questions later?
Yeah, I was asking if there are any particular areas that people want to talk about, because this thing. So if there are no particular thoughts that people want to talk about, let me try and talk about 2 or 3 things. Let's say this whole thing about the concept of ratings, whether we should have ratings or not, and how people think about it. In the last few years, organizations have tried to remove ratings. Yeah? And while they've removed ratings, they've tried and got many things which have become like a surrogate. They've tried to bring up and come up with surrogates on very interesting ways of looking at performance. Deloitte has a system where they ask 4 questions, and based on that, they come up with a thing. AI is used in some ways where it is coming. So there are lots of newer ways that are there. Now, if I were to look at it, I look at these newer ways as in 2 matrices. One matrix is saying database. Yeah, so there are real-time database index that are coming up. And AI can say, okay, these are the targets, this is where you are, this is where you stand in respect to your things. So there are lots of data, and that's one way of ensuring that people are. So therefore, using of data and putting data through AI is one way. The other way is a subjective assessment using different things. So therefore, there are 2 axes we can work on. The first axis is this data axis, real time, crowdsourced data. The second one is a subjective assessment which comes in. And the subjective assessment earlier was supposed to be only the boss. But now if you can expand that subjective assessment and say, okay, now I'm going to have in this subjective assessment, views of my peer, my other people I work with. I'm getting a cross section of where people do it. That kind of, or some organizations, they do a talent assessment using a group and use that 9-box matrix to do it. Those kind of things. So there are these two approaches that are coming, which are doing away with ratings or acting as surrogates for rating. I think that this is very interesting. And I think as organization, if I were to look at one area where technology, AI can play a big role, is in performance management. Because if we can get lots of data points of data coming across and telling people that, look, these are all the data that is available. How do you really use this to come up with an assessment of yourself, assessment of your teams? That will really, democratize things, bring more fairness. So I would think that the future, I would say, is a lot more real-time data collated together to give you a view of where you are, what you are doing, etc. The system, the algorithms have to work well, but I think over time that's what we'll be probably getting. And that data could be both objective performance data as well as subjective views of people. Yeah? And I think the most successful organization, and I'm looking for somebody who can really be break through in this. If you can put all of this together and come up with a composite view of where I am, which I trust, which I believe in, which is good, then I think we would have cracked that. So I think if we can, I mean, that's one area where I would look for innovation. I would look for things is, let's try and kind of, the word triangulate is a little bit of a misnomer because there are so many data points, but how do you create, using many data points, this kind of so-called triangulation of that to tell you this is where you are, these are something that you're doing well, these are something you can improve based on all of that. That would be, and then nobody has to tell a person a rating, nobody has to tell them, but there is some kind of a score that comes, which is a little bit. So therefore, good or bad, if this score is verified, ranking thing, and it also has got inputs for people, that will be a great thing. So I would see that as one of the biggest innovations that's going to come within performance management. The second thing is feedback. And when I look at feedback, I think, when I was young, when I was a young HR person or a thing, I used to be very fond of saying everybody has to give feedback. When I was driving performance management, I was pushing people to give feedback, etc., etc. Then over time, I found that, this thing, when people have been working in teams for a long time, they say, "Kya feedback?" Then what do I tell these guys? And therefore, just think, the more I realize is we've got to really think of feedback in very different ways. So number one, first feedback is what is called a contextual feedback. And that is very important for each job, each project. And I think if that feedback is not given in time at that thing, that feedback is a waste. So we got to think of getting managers, people to say, okay, what is contextual feedback that you think is got to be very important that people should get? Everything they've done, can you do this better? Can you do this? So that feedback in a coaching kind of way has to be given. So that's one type of feedback. The second type of feedback is what I would call as, there are two, three others, but second type is clearly the one feedback which is saying, okay, this is a feedback which says, okay, if you're doing at a particular level, if you want to really move to the next level of performance, what kind of things you could do. Now, this is a feedback that is normally should be given after seeing somebody for some time, maybe 6 months, 1 year, and you say, okay, great, you've been doing all of this. Now, if your performance needs to move to this level, this is what it is. So what you do is you take all the contextual feedback, you put some patterns around it. You take those patterns and say, okay, how is it different from some others who are doing well? So which is the gold standard there? And then you say, okay, these are some things you can do. Yeah. Now, can an AI do it? I don't know, but this is what we need to do. So there is a contextual feedback, which I think the manager think about. Then there is a feedback which says, okay, how do you change your game? How do you go to the next level? And this feedback has to see patterns. So therefore, the skill of managing, seeing patterns, identifying, okay, what what are successful people doing and what patterns they're showing and what are the difference, and telling this person this is what it is. So that's the second type of feedback. The third type of feedback is a feedback which is very much about the personal long-term career growth aspirations of the individual. I'm doing something, saying I'm an HR, I'm a BPHR, doing, as a business partner for a small unit. Then this feedback is, okay, what is your career? Where do you want to go? How are you? And therefore, how do you really plan that career growth? That's the third type of feedback. That feedback has got to come in a much more different way. The way you talk about it is more mentoring kind of thing. It's about putting the thing about, okay, and putting yourself in the shoes of that person. Say, okay, if you're going to be, this is where your aspirations are, what are the kind of things you could do, what it is. So it is co-creating a kind of a roadmap with that person. Yeah. And that feedback is about saying, okay, these are some strengths, these are some areas you've done, not done, you need to do it. So it's a plan. It's more thinking about a career plan. So that's a third type of feedback. And the last type of feedback is really the feedback on dysfunctional behavior, which is a small percentage, but maybe 10-20%. Now, why it's very important is these are, sometimes you do it, but I think you've got to do it in the right context. This feedback, dysfunctional behavior, because sometimes for great people, this one behavior can be a derailer, as I say. And in India, we are afraid to say all of this, especially for good performers, we're afraid to say that. But future the guys kind of end up getting into it. So therefore, we've got to think about this fourth type of feedback, and how do you really manage feedback of dysfunctional behavior, which could be derailers in the future. And this needs much more deeper empathy. This feedback needs to be discussed separately much more. So now you look at this feedback. Now feedback is of 4 types, and they're very different. Now, when we're talking about doing all of this at one appraisal time, we're going to completely screw it up. Yeah? We're not going to do it well. So you've got to plan this in a very different way. And I think as HR, I think this is my learning. Earlier, I thought one great feedback session after appraisal, everything will be solved. But it's not so. Yeah, I think these things we'll have to see each one. And I think there are these 3 or 4 types of things. And how do you really manage each of these over time is going to be a challenge. Okay, so again, maybe I'll take a break and see if there are some interesting questions that I will talk about, and then maybe we can pick up some of the other things that we can speak. Let me see what else we have here.
Sure. So we'll begin with a question and answer session where Rakesh is asking, in this VUCA world, do we need a rigid performance management system or an agile performance management system?
Rakesh, bhai, dekho this VUCA world and all, a little bit of, frankly, this VUCA has been on for a long time, yeah, and VUCA is going to be there for a long time. Yeah? So therefore, the changes are going to be there. Yeah. What does VUCA mean? VUCA means everything is changing so fast. Now, if you really look at it, in most organizations, in day-to-day thing, the VUCA doesn't apply so much that things are changing, every day. It's not like that. Some industries, maybe it's much more. Some industries, a bit less. Yeah. Now, the whole question is, if the performance management has to meet its objective, it has to be agile. So the objective is every performance management has to be agile. Now, what is the level of agility you want is what you got to see. Now, what is the level of agility you may need is this. In a VUCA thing where there's a lot of change happening, you would need to change your goalposts. Yeah? You may need to change your targets. You may need to really look at it. And therefore, some of these companies which are like those early startup where they don't even know what should be a target, don't put targets. Therefore, you just say, okay, I'll do it. I'll just see how I'm improving. I can add that. Some established companies would have targets. So setting goals is one area. What you want to do and think, you cannot hard code them in a VUCA world. And you want to have a process of saying, okay, I can change it. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, but someday you want to change what you want to do and how you want to do. Those are the 2 things that are changed. But there are some other things that are particularly need to continue. Yeah, the processes of various other things around performance management need to continue. So I don't think it is I think we've got to not get completely swayed by this VUCA kind of stuff, but we got to look at what are the merits of it. In my industry, what is happening? The premise is every system has to be agile. Otherwise, the system is gone. So therefore, don't say I will have a non-agile system. No, every system has to be agile. Agile means it has to meet the right needs for which it is developed. So a performance management system, if I look at its agility, it means it's got to say, okay, if I'm measuring different things, if I'm supposed to be doing different things, then does the system look after it? So I think we should have a process where you kind of have this ability to change some of those things. Yeah. So in a fast changing company, processes of setting targets, setting goals, what you do, those should change. The way you look at feedback and things, those will change. You can have more agile team meetings where you decide what we do, those kind of things. So again, we'll work from industry to industry. But again, I think, maybe I'll take a minute here to talk about one concept or one principle. I can dig up a slide, but let me just, but that will take too long. But I'll just talk about it because I think that's a framework that I think we in HR all have to really look at. And that framework is really, there are these 4 broad elements, or there are 5 broad elements that we got to keep in mind here. The first is the strategy of the company, the industry you're in and what's your strategy. Based on the strategy, you decide what is the kind of work that is to be done. The kind of work, what is the impact on the work that is happening. Is the strategy changing the work that you're doing? Now, once that thing is there, then you go to the people. What is the kind of skill set of people that is needed? What are the different types of people, their skill set, different behaviors that they need to show is different. That's the people that you need. Then there are 2 important ones. One is what I call as the informal culture, the formal thing, and one is the formal processes in the company. The informal is the culture, the informal structures, culture of the company, and there is this formal structure in the company. So there are these 4 or 5 elements which all work together. What's the strategy of the company? And this strategy, is it changing the work that you're doing, and how is it changing the work? What kind of people and behavior that is needed? Number 2, what are the informal structures, informal culture that is required to make this successful? Number 4, what are the formal structure, processes that are needed to make? So all these 4 have to talk to each other. And therefore, that's what is real agility. There's this congruence model, or there is fit. Yeah, if you want to look at this model, it's a model called the congruence model. You can Google it, or it's called the theory of fit. It's by this guy who's written this book called Competing by Design. Yeah, what's his name? I forget his name. I'll try and remember it and send it. But all it says is, listen, it's a systems approach. Yeah, the people you need, the work they do, the informal culture and systems, and the formal system all have to have a fit. You can't have a work which is changing very fast and have a process which is completely rigid and doesn't change. All these have to work. So therefore, any organization, you got to ensure that these 4 are working in tandem. I think that's how performance management also has to be.
Sure. So moving on to the next question, Deepak is asking, rating scale or standard distribution curve is used to support biases. Data is ignored many a times and guts comes in due to power or position. How we should bring objectivity into the system?
So this is the perpetual problem that we have. In everything, the might of the people in power is important. So that's why I think I was telling you, Deepak, earlier that rating is quite a, if it is left to arbitrary kind of thing, then it becomes little bit things. Therefore, you have to first trust the people that you have as leaders. So you got to ensure that you have the right leaders who will take the right decisions in the longer term interest of the company. That's number 1. But more important, the only way to remove this is to really get a lot more of data points. A lot more, as I said, objective data points and subjective data points from different sources. Put it all together and ensure that these data points are robust. As long as we get all of these data points in some way, and that's where we should try with this, in this environment. Put all of that and then let people take a call. See, at the end, again, it depends on the philosophy of organization. Some organizations will say, in all this, I'll still trust my leader. I still trust my manager. I will train him, but I'll trust him. I'll empower him. Yeah, that's one thing. The other philosophy will say, even if he does it, I'm going to have a process that will check and this and that. Some of the large organizations, where you have hundreds of thousands of employees, you'll have to go the latter way because you can't control individuals in a big way. Smaller companies may, with clearer setups, will know who's who and they'll know exactly, and therefore they have a better view of managing people more empowerment. So I think, the scale also matters. But to ensure that, we have to get this whole thing about more data points, more objectivity, more subjective as well as objective data points from different sources, and try and triangulate those together. Yeah, I don't know if that helps you.
Sure, sure. The next question is about the much talked about concept bell curve. So, what is your view of using bell curve method for normalization? Will it still be required when you have so much data to validate individual performance?
No, I think I would believe that the bell curve served a purpose. As long as it is well designed, it is kind of a thing. It served a purpose. But what has happened is, if you live and die by the bell curve, then it becomes a bit of a problem. Yeah? And people kind of use political pressures to, maneuver around the bell curve. So I think what we've got to do is, over time, with all this data coming, the bell curve will die down. Yeah, bell curve will die down. But I think what we have to have as managers, we have to keep training them, saying, listen, in the end, you've got to have some kind of a differentiation. It's not possible that you can do the same amount of exceptional rewards to all 100% of your people. You got to have some kind of way of making that differentiation. So therefore, again, it will go down with different companies, but if we can find a way where we can get this differentiation done in a fair way, then you don't need that bell curve. So I think over time, bell curve will go away. I think with so much data coming, so much transparency, I feel that we should not have a bell curve, but have a better way of ensuring that, either through some guidelines to ensure that the budget that they have, the kind of thing they use, judiciously, etc. So therefore, using data points, we got to get that. That part has to be done carefully.
Sure, sure. So we also have Mr. Sridhar from Adrenaline. Mr. Sridhar, do you have any views around the new age performance management system, which is centered around care and technology?
Good question. I have 5 minutes to go for this. So I think Krish has covered care exceedingly well, with a considerable amount of care, if I may say so. In terms of when he talked about what are you caring for, in terms of improvement for the individual, in terms of growth for the individual, the transparency of the whole process, in terms of being completely open, and not anything that is being held back. And so that, I think, is what he mentioned, and I completely endorse that point of view. And I think as far as technology is concerned, I think there is a lot that has happened. So you have now a digital product which can help you constantly monitor goals, constantly monitor feedback. It records feedback. It can be played back. All these things are now available in the system. So that is something that is a technology that is seen, and data in keeping the record intelligence, we should alive and better. So, and move to answer your question.
Sure. Sure. So we just
I just had one question to Chris.
Oh my God. Go ahead.
I just want you to talk a little bit, if there is time still, on the soft skills for PMS. because this whole thing is revolves around people, revolves around how managers deal with other people. So this is but perhaps one area where a lot of managers fail because they're not able to relate, they're not able to connect, and so these principles of care, transparency, sort of fall apart a bit. So, what are your views on this, and how do you think organizations could go about building this?
No, I think see this is an important ingredient. When we really look at how you can make things work. And again, I go back to this. You can have a great system, but if you don't have the right culture and the right leadership to make those systems will fail. Yeah. I think what we have to do is start this training right from the beginning. Both even in our case, even from school and college and other things, we got to focus a lot more on the soft skills, a lot more on this understanding, empathy, influencing, those kind of things. We got to teach a lot more. But I think it is important because the more we build that and build that capability in managers to have this empathy, look at things and work, we'll be able to do much more than any of these systems can. So I think the quality of the managers amplify your systems. They make some of your systems work well. And at times, your systems are predicated on the fact that you guys have good people doing it. So I think, I mean, again, I may be a little bit thing, but see, when we had the performance management left earlier, the managers took a lot more time. Again, in my early career, I was in levers with a lot of great leaders. The amount of time they spent on putting a performance appraisal was phenomenal. I mean, they would take to write a paragraph on a person. They would take 2 or 3 rounds, go through it, read it, ensure that the right words are used. So the care was phenomenal. And I think that really epitomized the amount of effort that is needed in it. We also need good role models to tell people about it. So I think the focus, the amount of time, the importance that we're giving this has to peter down from everybody. So I think it's a very, very important part of any great company or performance management. And I think in this day and age, we are losing that. We don't have time. Sometimes this online stuff takes away all of that. You try and put something and go away. So I think we've got to ensure that thoughtfulness comes into this a lot.
Thank you, Krish. I don't know. We seem to have been good. So I don't know if you have more questions there.
Yeah, so we actually have one more question. He's asking Krish about what kind of performance management, applications and the methods. What kind of methods do you use to collect performance data in your organization?
No, I think, see, there is one is normally the self-reporting, managers putting their own stuff. Yeah, that is there. But that's what most organizations do. You enter saying, I've done this, etc., etc. But I think if there are areas where data on key projects can be caught, there are so many systems that we have in the organization. Your financial reporting system, your budgeting systems, your sales CRM systems. So I think how do we integrate all of these to get enough data points, to tell what she is doing. For example, the engagement scores of people, if that can all come together and managers can see how this is all where I am compared to where it is. I can't claim to be a great leader. The attrition I've had in my team, all of this data should be popping up. They should be right there on the screen for them to decide and see where they are, so that they get a realistic view. So I think while there is a lot of self-reporting, we've got to think of what are the various systems and data that we have and how can we bring it in. And that needs a little bit of internal architecting, etc., etc. Systems or manual, whatever it is, but that data we've got to bring up.
Sure. Sridhar, would you like to share a closing note before we wrap up this session?
No, I think I just want to thank Krish that despite, I know he's been traveling, he's had some serious committee meetings of the board, and despite all that, I think for him to give us an hour of his time and his insights has been exceedingly valuable. So I'm ever grateful to Krish for this. I also want to thank People Matters for organizing this on our behalf. So that's what I want to say. Hopefully the inputs that Krish has provided would help trigger some thoughts for people in terms of looking at their own processes, systems, methods, ways of doing things, and take PMS to the next level in their respective organizations. So thank you very much for organizing this, Anushri, and being our central anchor there. Thank you, and thank you, Krish, especially.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, with this question and answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webcast. We have many more questions coming in, which I will request our speakers to take offline. We would like to thank our today's webcast partner, Adrenaline, and a speaker, Krish, for the valuable information. Meanwhile, you can provide your feedback in the survey link provided in the chat section because your input matters. Stay tuned for many more such exciting sessions. That concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Krish.